Welcome this morning to Motivation by Design. We're going to talk about how to build tasks and assignments that help people get things done. This is something that I've thought a lot about, and Shane mentioned that I've been teaching at BYU for the last 12 years in the Marriott School. And management communications is an important part of work life, and so we're going to talk quite a bit about some tips and secrets behind composing great communications in the business setting. Let's dive in here. Oh wait, I've got a couple of announcements before we do that. First, if you would like to see these slides, if you'd like to get a hold of them, there's a tiny URL there that will let you do it. The way these Google Meets work, that's not a live link, so you'll have to jot it down, but hopefully it's not too long to jot down. Just tinyurl.com y35kd9xm. And then also, if you are in need of closed captioning services, Google does provide voice recognition closed captioning. Here's how you do it. You just put your cursor down to the bottom of the page there. The little toolbar will jump up, and then you just click the turn on captions. And it's not perfect, but it will grab what I'm saying, and as long as I'm saying it clearly, which is maybe no guarantee, but as long as I'm saying it somewhat clearly, it'll pick it up. It's a pretty good captioning service. Also, you may hear a dog barking in the background. That's my dog, Theo, and he's being kind of noisy today, so my apologies if that becomes distracting. I wanted to let you know about the next couple of off-the-shelf trainings that we have coming up. In 2 weeks, JJ Acker will present using stretch assignments to unleash employee talent. It's a perfect topic to build on what we talk about today. Mark your calendars for November 4th, same time, 10 a.m. We will send out a link to take a look at that. I'm sorry, we'll send out a link so you can register for that with the survey that we send out at the end of the meeting. Then 2 weeks after that, 4 weeks from now, Dr. Dan Chase will present Abraham Lincoln's leadership legacy. Dan did his doctoral dissertation on this very topic. And in fact, he's trapped right now. He's en route to Gettysburg, where he will be presenting on this topic again. He goes out there multiple times per year and is really an expert on Abraham Lincoln and his leadership styles. So you don't want to miss that one. Mark your calendar for November 18th, 10 a.m. And again, we'll have links to that in the survey that we send out. Just a quick reminder, Shane just mentioned this, we are recording this, so if you don't want to be seen in the recording, then just mute your mic and maybe turn off your camera. We'd like to send this out to everybody when we're done so that you can review at your leisure. So we are recording it, and we're archiving it, and we'll put it up on our YouTube page when we're done with it. So just fair warning. All right, that's me. The reason that I put this slide, oops, I haven't even gone to the slide. There we go. The reason I put this slide up here is because I want you to see my email address, rsmurdoch@utah.gov. If you have any comments or questions, or if you'd like to further discuss this, if you'd like to push back in any way, feel free to send me an email. The way that we're doing these with the audience is pretty big. So we have to do streaming services for most of you. Some of you are in the actual meet room, but interacting is very difficult. And I prefer to interact with people when we're having discussions about stuff. I hate to be the only one talking. So if you have comments or questions, or you'd like to bring up anything, feel free, shoot me an email. I'd love to chat with you. Okay, let's talk about what we're doing here today. This is kind of a breakdown of the topics that we'll kind of go through. We'll start with principles of behavior design and motivation, and then we'll talk about some tips for creating assignments and task breakdowns. And most of this stuff is going to come from scholarly sources. We'll also talk about how to use design as an element of effective communication. In other words, we're going to start thinking about how our messages look as much as what's in the message. And there's some reasons for that. We'll talk about that as we go forward. Let's start with this quote. People are more creative and productive when their inner work lives are positive. That's the key phrase right there, inner work lives. We'll talk about that for a few minutes here. And then the quote goes on to define what inner work lives are. When they feel happy, are intrinsically motivated by the work itself, and have positive perceptions of their colleagues and the organization. Moreover, in those positive states, people are more committed to the work and more collegial towards those around them. There are a lot to unpack here. Our inner work lives influences how well we work and how kind we are to each other. Interesting. This is taken from an article in the Harvard Business Review. If you get the slideshow, there's a link there that you can use to go check out the article. We'll send these slides out to you. You don't have to go there now, but we'll send them out to you. In other words, workers are more creative and productive when their inner work life is positive. And again, that means they are happy, they like what they do, and they like the people around them, and they like who they're doing it for. Let's think about that for just a minute. Managers, leaders, and coworkers who want their folks to be productive can help create an environment that makes it more likely by encouraging happiness, meaningful work, and relationships between coworkers and relationships between workers and their organization. We do things better when we like the stuff around us. I mean, that's not a secret. But it isn't something we really think much about as leaders in the workforce. We don't really think much about how am I helping my people be happy? And in fact, there's not much we really can do to affect someone's happiness. It's really not, I mean, that's not our role to make someone else happy. It never has been. That's called codependence, I think. But when we really think about it, when we are tied to something that we think is meaningful, or when we're tied to an organization that we think is doing great work, we tend to work harder for that organization. We tend to work harder on that project. We tend to put more into it. Let's say, maybe not work harder. Maybe that's the wrong word. Maybe it's we put more into it. We put more of ourselves into it. And when we do that, we feel happy. At least a lot of the time. I think a great example of an organization whose folks really do buy into its mission. I worked for UDOT for 12 years, and I remember the very first time I went to it was a church meeting of some kind. I sat down and I introduced myself, and I told everybody I worked for UDOT. And there was a guy at the organ, and he started playing a funeral dirge, and everybody laughed. I laughed too. It was a funny joke. But the traveling public thinks of UDOT as orange barrels and slowing down traffic. But if you're inside UDOT, you know that all other DOTs look to UDOT as a guiding light. UDOT is known as an innovative and progressive DOT and the envy of other DOTs. And it's a great place to work with proud people who do great work. And that's the type of organizations we're talking about, where we feel like we are doing something for other people. When we can buy into the mission of an organization, we tend to do our best work. All right, so the idea here is that we find a way to create meaningful work. I think we need to define this a little bit, meaningful work. Now, I can't define it for really any of you. You're going to have to define this for yourself. But let's take just a minute. I'm going to give you like 10 seconds to really think about this. What is meaningful work to you as an individual? What does it mean when your work is meaningful? Define that for yourself. And if you want to jot it down on a piece of paper or type it into this doc or whatever, please do. What is meaningful work for you? Now, we talked about how the inner work life is important to good, solid performance. And really, it is kind of a feedback loop. We'll call it the progress loop. When we have a positive inner work life, we tend to give a better performance, good performance. And a good performance leads to a more positive inner work life. And it becomes a feedback loop where inner work life and good performance all work together, and we just get better and better and progress and progress. And that's exactly what we want for the people that work for us or work with us. We want continual, even if it's incremental improvement. That's what we want. And there's two things we can extrapolate from this idea that inner work life affects performance. The one implication is that it can also be a negative feedback loop. Negative inner work life, where we don't feel like we have meaningful work and where we don't necessarily buy into our organization, where we don't like the people around us, tends to lead to a lesser performance. And that lesser performance tends to lead to a more negative inner work life. And the other thing that we can extrapolate here is that as managers, leaders, and coworkers, we don't need to make employees happy. The progress loop will do that for us. All we need to do is focus on making the work meaningful. Making the work meaningful. That will help make employees feel motivated and happy. As long as we are showing basic respect and consideration, we can just focus on supporting the work itself, and that will deal with all of the psychological stuff. I mean, yeah, of course, there's psychological issues that come outside of work, and we can be there to support with that as well to some degree. But if we focus on making the work meaningful for our employees, that progress loop will help us build performance. All right, I need to show you a model that kind of goes along with this. Actually, before I do that, let's talk about our schedules. Because if we're talking about meaningful work, one of the things that we need to focus on is finding a time every day where everybody we work with, the people that we supervise, our coworkers, ourselves, find time in our schedule to work towards what we would think of as meaningful work. So you've defined meaningful work for yourself. Now think through your weekly schedule. Do you have time every day where you're doing something that you think is meaningful? Now, meaningful doesn't mean huge and grandiose. It just means I'm working towards a higher goal or something that I value. Have you got time in your schedule every day where you are doing that? If not, it's time to reevaluate our schedules. We all have, I mean, we schedule ourselves to various degrees. There are some that schedule from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. The calendar is completely full. If you're one of those people where you can't slip another 10 minutes in to work on meaningful things, maybe you should look at what's already on the calendar and decide whether or not any of those things are meaningful work. My guess is you'll find that you are working towards meaningful things because humans tend to gravitate towards that. And if you were in the session that we did 6 weeks ago, or maybe it's 5 weeks ago, that I led about distance work, we learned that people tend to drop off things that are not important to them, especially when they're working from a distance and don't have someone looking over their shoulder. And so check your calendar. Make sure that you've got at least a little bit of time every day to work on something that you think of as meaningful. And if you're a manager or supervisor, make sure that your employees are also finding time every day to work on something meaningful. It will mean a lot to how they feel about their jobs. It'll mean a lot about their performance. So find some time every day. All right, let's talk about the Fogg behavior model. This is really just BJ Fogg, who works at Stanford University. He came up with this really simple idea, and I think it's great for helping people accomplish things. So if we're looking to build tasks and assignments that will get things done, this is one way to start. Okay, so behavior, we've got an equation here. It's really a function of a function of motivation and ability. Behavior is a function of motivation and ability. And we're going to define ability as there on the left of this of the line there, the x-axis, something that's hard to do as opposed to something that's easy to do. And then motivation, of course, is low motivation as opposed to high motivation. There's one more element to this function. So behavior is motivation, ability, and a prompt. And we'll call that line that just popped up there, we'll call that the action line. So everything on the left and below that line are things that we aren't going to do. We either don't have the ability or we don't have the motivation. So the stuff on this side of the line, it won't, we're not going to do it. We're adults, we get to choose what we do, right? If we want to get people to do something that maybe they wouldn't do otherwise, we somehow have to make it land over here. If they don't have much motivation to do something and we want them to do it, we have to make it really easy for them. That line indicates a prompt. Basically, a prompt can be anything that would trigger you to do the action that we want you to do. It could be as easy as just asking for it. A lot of times that's what it is. Let's imagine that we've got an employee, we're going to give them an assignment, and we realize that it's the first time they'll be doing something like this, and so we've made it fairly easy for them. We put it right here. Now, the way that this model works is that we can build our motivation through baby steps, build our motivation and our ability through baby steps. So the first time we do it, we've made whoever's designed the task for us has made it fairly easy, and so we're successful. We do it, and the next time we do it, it's a little bit easier, and we're a little bit more motivated to do it. And when we do it again and again, we become better at it. It becomes easier to do, and we become slightly more motivated as we go because we're having success. Once we get to a certain point where this is like a cakewalk now, we're clear over here in the easy to do stuff, we can take this motivation that we've built up and we can move it that way. So now we can introduce something that's a little bit harder that's related, and because our motivation's a little higher, we'll do it. And we'll do it again and again and again. And then we can start to baby step walk people into high motivation and doing things that are very difficult. This is it's called Tiny Steps, and I think it's called Baby Steps Motivation. It's BJ Fogg. Go look it up. He's kind of the foremost expert on this type of thing. The good news here is that even these tiny little small wins that we're talking about, going from this to this, they can boost the inner work life tremendously. They really can. Many of the progress events are the research participants from the article I referenced earlier reported that they made only minor steps forward in the things that they're progressing towards, but even those minor steps really evoked outsized positive reactions. So even a tiny little bit, an incremental improvement on a project will add to that inner work life, that adds to performance, that adds to motivation. All of it works together. We have to find a way to be working on meaningful work and then progressing towards a goal in that meaningful work. So much of the time when we give assignments out to folks, we tend to just kind of vaguely say what we want and then leave it at that. Let me just give you a way to give an assignment that has a couple of subtle things that will change the way the assignment works so that it is working towards these baby steps that we're talking about and building up motivation and confidence and ability. Really, this is, I mean, if you were to think about it, this is really just practice. This is what we call practice. If we are a wide receiver, we're running our routes, and then we get a slightly more complicated playbook and we're running those, and that's what we're doing. We're just practicing. So let's look at a way to give a meaningful assignment that might be helpful to you, hopefully. All right, this is just an assignment that I've been given over the last couple of months. And I'm just going to break it down for you. First, we need to articulate the objective that, and basically we need to define what we want the person to do. Okay, so for me it was, as part of the goal that we set to provide audio for all of our training sessions, and then here comes the specific assignment to me. Rick, would you record a voiceover track for this particular module in our training? That's the specific assignment. Notice it has my name, and it has basically, I mean, you could think of it as kind of a polite command. Record a voiceover track for one of these things, right? Okay, so that's the specific assignment. And then we try to break that assignment down into digestible chunks. Now, this is not necessarily something that we have to do as the person giving the assignment. This is something that the assignee can do for themselves. But it's great to kind of give some suggestions, or at least lead them that way. You'll probably need to test the recording gear, find a quiet spot, so on and so forth. And what's happened here is that we're going to give a small list of steps that the person will need to take in order to accomplish the overall specific assignment. We also will build in follow-up and a deadline of some kind. So something like report how it's going in our Tuesday meeting, or plan to report how it's going on our Tuesday meeting. And then finally, it needs to be recorded. So ask, will you add this project to our team assignment tracker? Now, what I've done here is I've laid out a couple of specific sentences because I want to show you what type of sentences we're using here. This is where I'm about to go full grammar on you, so please forgive me for that. But I think it's important because the type of sentence that we use, it says something about what we're asking from our folks. You may remember this from 10th grade English class. It's called, these types of sentences are in moods. You remember moods, the moods of sentences? If you don't, that's fine. I don't remember them from 10th grade English either. I remember them from much later. But they are the three moods that we're using here in this example are indicative sentences, imperative sentences, and subjunctive sentences. Let me define that for you really quickly. Indicative sentences are statements of fact. Imperative sentences are commands. And subjunctive sentences are suppositions, are kind of wishy-washy thoughts. That's maybe not the best way to describe them, but I think that gets the point across. So let's look at each of these sentences as we go through this assignment, and let's assign a mood to them, and then let's talk about what that mood might mean. First of all, in the articulated objective, we're just stating fact. We set a goal to provide audio for all of our training. So that's just an indicative sentence. I'm just going to state the fact. In the next one, this is basically a command. Rick, would you record a voiceover track for this module? So we're going to call that imperative. Imperative sentences are when we ask somebody to do something, or when we actually tell somebody to do something. Now, the way that this one's phrased with the would you softens it just a little bit, doesn't it? The most interesting sentence of all of these is this next one to me. You'll probably need to, and that word probably turns this sentence into a subjunctive sentence. What that does is it is less of a command and more of a, all right, it's your job to figure this part out. You come up with broken down digestible chunks that you can follow up on. And then finally, two more imperative sentences, and it's important that these are imperative. Report how it's going in our Tuesday meeting. That's a command. Do this. You will need to report on Tuesday. And then finally, we need to record this, so you will add this to our team assignment tracker. Now, with imperative sentences, it's one of the things that tip you off that it's an imperative sentence is that it will drop the subject of the sentence altogether. It will imply the you, and it will start with an action word. Report, add, test, record. That's a great way to help people remember what they need to do. If you use the right action word, in this case, it's report, and add, then they know immediately what they need to do from the sentence itself. If this were written out as an email, these two sentences would be really important. They become easier to remember. They become easier to digest. You don't have to dig to find out what you're being asked to do. I'm being asked to add the project to the team assignment tracker. I'm being asked to report how it's going into our Tuesday meeting. And then with the word probably, I get to kind of play with this. Okay? So building meaningful assignments have these elements. They state some sort of objective. Then they give the assignment. They leave some autonomy in the assignment for the person doing the assignment. And then they insist on follow-up and recording. It has to be written down somewhere, and it has to be followed up on. Clear? All right, so with that in mind, I'm thinking about all those emails we get where we get assignments from email, right? And we'll talk more about this in just a second. But as I was preparing for this, I remembered seeing a chart somewhere that has this. You'll recognize this. We've all seen this. We remember 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear, 70% of what we discuss with others, 80% of what we personally experience, and 95% of what we teach to others. This is great. We love this. And it's even attributed here. I found this on a university's website. It's attributed to Edgar Dale. So I did a little bit more digging, and I found that Edgar Dale didn't actually say this. This actually was seen, the very first time this was in 1913 in a magazine somewhere. And it's just kind of been perpetuated ever since. And it's in really the collective conscience of a lot of us. I mean, some of you will recognize this, right? And who knows if this is right or wrong. I actually, as I did more research, I found different percentages for each of those things. I found it broken up differently. I saw it in different orders. And so it really does kind of cast some doubt on these particular percentages, but the idea is still probably a good one. And what I did find while I was researching this is that Edgar Dale had a different thing that he came up with. It's similar to this, but I think is more applicable to what we're doing today. So I'm going to show you Edgar Dale's actual research. This is called the cone of experience. Edgar Dale was big in the 60s. He kind of worked to see, he was a behavioral scientist. And so let's just kind of go through this cone of experience. We've got read, hear, see and hear, and do. Very similar to the percentages we just looked at. But instead of giving percentages, he shows us what we're able to do with a message that comes in these forms. So if we read or hear something, we're able to list, explain, and describe that thing. List, explain, and describe. So in other words, if we read something or hear something, we can retain it and we can talk it back to people. If we are able to see and also see and hear at the same time, then we are able to demonstrate, apply, and practice. So now we go from the abstract of listing, explaining, describing to the practical of demonstrating, applying, and practicing. And then finally, if we do it, then we're able to analyze, create, and evaluate. For most of our assignments, when we're giving assignments, especially new assignments that people have not done before, we want to probably live here, because what we're asking people to do is demonstrate, apply, and practice. That's what we're asking people to do. So when we give our assignments, they probably ought to be in the range of see and hear instead of just read or hear. Now, this is a challenge in some ways. And really, once they've done the assignment, then they move into the do area and they can analyze, create, and evaluate what they've done. Makes perfect sense to me. I think it's a great model. We've got to figure out a way to let people see and hear what we want them to do. And so with that in mind, we need to start thinking about how we're designing our messages. How can we take them from reading or hearing and move them into see and hear? I have here an example of an email. Let's just imagine, and you don't need to read this, it's mostly nonsense, but let's imagine this email is in your inbox and you've just opened it and you're looking at it. Do you want to read this email? As it stands right now, I will say I don't want to read it. And if I don't have to read this email, I'm not going to. And even if I do read this, how likely is it that I will retain much of what I've read here? How likely is it that I even make it all the way through the email? What if the author of this email has buried some critical information in that fourth paragraph? I mean, the whole point of sending an email is to share information. And this is what I'm looking at here is just blocks of gray. There's a better way to do this. And I want to show you what it is. But let me introduce a concept first. This is called the Zoom Rubric, and this is what we use in our management communications classes to evaluate writing. It's a systematic way to evaluate our writing, or I guess our writing, or if somebody asks us to evaluate theirs, we could use it for that as well. We've been conditioned to think that content is ultimately the most important thing of our message, and in some ways, I guess it is. But content is, it is the message that matters. The content is the most important part of the message. But when we think about communication, what we're doing is we're disseminating information, like writing and speaking, and we're collecting information, like reading and listening. But there's really a fifth element that permeates all of these things: reading, listening, writing, and speaking. There's a fifth element that goes with those things, and that element is design. The way the message is presented, what it looks like, how it's organized, all of that works together with the actual content of the message to create a complete message. In other words, how it looks, how it's organized will depend on whether or not the person that you're trying to disseminate the information to actually gets the information. There's really four pieces to this. The first one is, we'll call it the 10-foot view. It's the design itself of the message. And the second piece is, we'll call the 5-foot view, is the organization of the message. And then finally, at the 2-foot view, as we're zooming in on this document, we get to the content area. And then the last thing we look at the 1-foot view, is style. Let me show you what I mean by that. Oh, before I do that, let me just mention this. The reason that we think that design is so important to our messages is that our brains look for patterns. They look for easy to identify and recognize patterns. In fact, if you think about it, our ancestors wandering through the bush, when they would come upon a tree with fruit on it, they would eat the fruit, and then they would look at the pattern and shape of the leaves, so that if they ever came upon that type of tree again, they would know that it was a good source of food, and that at certain times of the year they could come back, and if they were there at the right time, they'd find food. We are programmed to notice patterns. We're programmed to notice symmetrical and asymmetrical things. We're programmed to notice the things that stick out. And so when there's the fruit right there, as we come back at the right time of year to find the figs. So when we're looking at this email, this is the same email I just showed you. When we're looking at this email, there is nothing that works as a pattern to help us come back to it and find the fruit. There is nothing there that helps us. But I'm going to take that same email and I'm going to redesign it to look like this. Now, I'm looking at the first email, the kind of gray block one, and there's a couple of things I can extrapolate. I can see who it's from, marketing executive. I'm sorry, it's marketing research assistant. And I can see that the subject is fall clothesline promotion. And I don't know what fall clotheslines are. I assume it's either maybe clothing lines, or perhaps it's the wires that we hang clothes on to let them dry. I don't know. And if I don't dig into the message itself, and I'm not likely to do that because I'm a busy person and it's from marketing research assistant, I'm not going to read it. But if I see the second message, the one that's here on the right, immediately I see a logo and I see a couple of dresses, and now the clothesline makes more sense to me. It's probably a clothing line, a fall clothing line, and I can skim through this. There's two headings. Advertising on reality television, advertising on the internet and social media. Okay, I know what this is about. I know what this message is about. I can look at the chart and I can see that our reality shows have become more popular than non-reality shows on TV. And now I know that if we're going to advertise our fall clothes lines, our fall clothing lines, then we're going to want to advertise on reality TV. I know all of that about that message without reading a single word of it. That's what I'm talking about. Making the information accessible through design. And when we are giving assignments to our people, this is the type of thought that we need to put into it. How are we going to get that information to them in the easiest, most straightforward way? What that means for us as the people writing the message is we take one more step as we write. We write with the idea that we are designing for optimal information gathering. All right, so let's take a look at this 10-foot, 5-foot, 2-foot, and 1-foot view and kind of go through that. At the 10-foot view, we can really see the design of it. And a lot of times the design is what will hook our audience. If it is designed in a way that we don't want to look at it and don't want to read it, adults will make the choice not to, especially if they're busy and have other things to do. And especially if we're not directly responsible to, if they're not directly responsible to us. If we're the boss, they'll read our message. But if we're coming in from the side and trying to get something from someone, it's never going to happen. All right, so at the 10-foot view, we see the design of the message. We can extrapolate some things. Then at the 5-foot view, we start to think about the organization of the message. And let me just give you two things that will help you with organization. The first thing is, and they're really related. The first thing is find a way to get an obvious agenda for the message into that last into that last sentence of the first paragraph. Put your agenda here. Let's read it and see if this person has put an agenda here. Findings from focus groups and surveys indicate we need to update our advertising efforts to align them with the styles and trends of young adults today. And then here's the agenda, including reality television shows and the internet. There's reality. And then we use that agenda to create headings. So we've got reality television shows here. We've got internet here. We have our agenda here. We've told people what we're going to talk about. Now we're going to use that agenda to lay out the rest of this message. If I were an executive for this clothing line and I only dealt with the television ads, I probably could get away with just reading these two paragraphs and not have to worry about the internet stuff, right? So it's nice to do that for people. The other thing that I want to, that we're looking at the 5-foot view when we're thinking about organization is a strong opening sentence. And in business writing, we don't save our best stuff for the climactic part near the end. We don't do that. We put our best stuff right up front so people can find it immediately. Let's see if they've done that. Marketing research and analysis shows we need to reprioritize and change the proposed advertising media for the new fall lines. Yeah, that is exactly what this message is about. I know everything about this message from that one sentence. Our opening sentence should do that for people. All right, when we get into the 2-foot view, at this point, we're just looking at content and we just read the message. And then finally, at the 1-foot view, we're looking for mistakes that we've made. If we're evaluating our own work, we are looking for mistakes. We're looking for grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes, punctuation mistakes. Perhaps we went back and changed a sentence and forgot to delete one of the words. We're looking for stuff like that. Now, it's difficult to edit our own work because our brains tend to just gloss over the thing that we've been doing. And we know what we're trying to say, so our brains just tell us that's what we said. So a second set of eyes never hurts if it's an important message. All right, so that's the Zoom rubric. That's how I evaluate writing when I'm grading papers and when I'm looking at my own stuff. It's really helpful. It makes our messages more universal. It makes them more digestible. It makes them easier to enter into. And the great thing about that is when you've done that for someone and you've made it really easy for them to get the information that you're trying to give them, they appreciate it, they notice it, and they think of you as a great communicator. All wins all the way around. All right, moving on. Let's get back to talking about progress and setbacks. with progress, we have several things that are kind of catalysts. And let me just run through them. And I'll do it by asking some questions. These are questions that you can find in that HBR article I referenced earlier. This is just something you can ask yourself after you've given an assignment. Questions about the assignment. Did the team have clear short and long-term goals for meaningful work? Did team members have sufficient autonomy to solve problems and take ownership of the project? Did they have all the resources they needed? Did they have enough time to focus on that assignment? Or did they have enough time to focus on something that was meaningful to them? Did I give them the help that they needed when they requested it or when I noticed that they needed it? Did we discuss the lessons that we've learned from these projects? And did I allow ideas to flow freely? Now, all of these questions ask kind of the positive side of it. There is another side of it. There's setbacks, things that inhibit that progress loop that we talked about earlier, things that would make it a negative feedback loop. And really, we're asking similar questions. Was there any confusion in the goal that we set? Were team members overly constrained in their ability to solve their own problems and take ownership? Did they lack any of the resources they needed? Did they lack enough time to focus on meaningful work? Did I fail to provide help? Did I punish failure and neglect to find lessons? Did I or others cut off the presentation and debate of ideas prematurely? Those are questions to ask ourselves. Are we inhibiting or setting back our teams in some way? These questions are not meant to be punishment. We have to kind of get that out of our heads that we're punishing adults, employees. Yeah, sure, there's times when we need to do corrective action, sure. But most of the time when people are trying to do their work, we got to start thinking of failure as a positive where we can learn from it, learn lessons, and move on to the next thing. We have to think of it as a necessary step within the path that we're headed. Because as the article mentions, when somebody hits a setback, it can throw them off. That feedback loop starts to go backwards, and it can throw them off for days. So a setback can be really dangerous to the success of our team. So we're looking for lessons that we can learn so that we can avoid these types of inhibitors. All right, let's talk about, what we've talked about with catalysts and inhibitors, we're talking about getting the ball rolling, right? Once it's going, we need to find ways to keep it growing. So we're looking for ways to nourish that feedback loop. Here's some questions to ask ourselves. Did I show respect to my team members? Did I recognize their contributions to the progress that we're making? Did I recognize their ideas? Did I treat them as trusted professionals? Did I encourage team members who faced difficult challenges? Did I support team members who had a personal or professional problem? And is there a sense of personal and professional affiliation and camaraderie within our team? If we can answer yes to all those things, then we're doing it right. There is another side to them, of course, and that is the questions we could ask is, did I disrespect any members of my team? Did I discourage them in any way? Did I neglect them when they needed help? Is there tension or antagonism in our team? All right, let me show you just one last thing here. This is it's a screen grab of a spreadsheet that I created for that same assignment that we talked through earlier. This is something that you can have. There's a live link here at the bottom of the slide. When you get those slides, you can go there and you can make a copy of this and adjust it to whatever your needs are. But here's the idea. We've got our initial goal to record a voiceover track for the new statewide supervisor training modules. We have listed the resources we needed. We've broken it into digestible chunks, prepare scripts, record modules, edit as needed. We've listed our setbacks so that we can learn from them. We had some software issues. Adobe Audition wasn't functioning properly, and what we did to mitigate that problem. And then when it's all said and done, we recorded some lessons learned down here and a couple things to remember for next time. You're welcome to use this spreadsheet if you'd like. Just go make a copy of it and adjust it to however you like. Or you can make your own or do something else. You're probably already doing something to record and capture the assignments that you're giving. I think it's important that, well, it's not just me. It's important that we write down the stuff that we're assigning people, that we get it written down. One great thing for this type of thing is when I forget what my assignment is and the steps of it, I can go back here and take a look. This takes a few minutes. This is something that takes some time, but it's well worth the time at the beginning of the project to try to do this. And remember to think of this thing as a living document that you can adjust as you go. There is nothing on here that is going to be punitive if we don't do it in the way that it's written here. Although there may be a deadline that could lead to some punitive stuff. But this is just something that you're welcome to use if you'd like. All right, let's talk through, just kind of as a recap, what we've talked about today. We're about ready to be done here. The recap really is this. Oh, it's gone. It's not on my list. My slide disappeared. Let me read the recap to you. Happiness is incremental improvement, and little effort goes a long way in helping employees improve their inner work lives. The second takeaway, communication is partly strategic design. Communication is partly design. The way a message looks and is organized is hugely influential on whether or not that message will be received. And then finally, we use imperative, digestible sentences when we're giving assignments and when we're asking for something. In other words, we say the action word and then we complete the idea. Record this goal in our spreadsheet, that type of thing. And that pretty much brings us to the end of our message today. Let me just remind you that you'll be getting an email with this recording, with these slides, and then also with a way to sign up for the next couple of off-the-shelf sessions. The next one is on November 4th at 10 a.m. using stretch assignments to unleash employee talent, presented by J.J. Acker. You can see there what we'll be going through. What is a stretch assignment, when to use it, when not to use it, advantages and disadvantages, and how to structure them. And then 2 weeks after that, Abraham Lincoln's Leadership Legacy with Dr. Dan Chase. And we'll talk about why Abraham Lincoln is still an important role model. And you can read that there. All right, thank you so much for your time and attention today. I appreciate you being here. Hopefully there's something that you can have gleaned and use in your work life to improve your inner work life. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.